Think about the last time you worked really hard or something. Not just hard, really hard. You woke up early for it. You stayed up late for it. You did what you were supposed to do. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you were waiting for it to pay off, waiting for the things to finally click, waiting for the version of your life that was supposed to come from all that effort. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But here is the question nobody ever asked out loud. What if the outcome was never really about the effort? What if the game was decided long before you ever showed up to play? In the late 60s, a psychologist at Stanford ran a study that would quietly shape the way the entire world would think about success. His name was Walter Mischel. He didn't study adults. He didn't study grades, IQ, their intelligence. He studied children, 4-year-olds. All he used was a single marshmallow. The test was simple. A child sits alone in a room, one marshmallow in front of them on a plate, and the researcher tells him, I have to step out for a few minutes. If the marshmallow is still here, when I get back, then I will give you 2. Then he leaves, and he watches them through a one-way mirror. Some children wait, they look away, they try to distract themselves, they sing to themselves, they cover their eyes. Others don't make it 30 seconds. And for 50 years, Mischel tracked every single one of those kids. What he found out made international headlines. The children who waited went on to have better grades, better careers, better relationships, better health. They lived longer. They stayed out of trouble. They built more stable lives. The children who didn't wait showed the opposite pattern across almost every measure. The world took one look at this data and drew a very clean conclusion. Self-control is the secret to success. Teach children to delay gratification and you change their future. Schools built programs around it. Psychologists wrote best-selling books about it. Parents started testing their own children at home. And sitting quietly underneath all of it was an assumption nobody thought to question. Around the same time, a psychologist at Stanford named Dweck was watching students how they respond to failure. She noticed something strange. 2 students, same classroom, same test, same failing grade. One student looked at the paper and thought, I need to figure out, what did I do wrong? The other looked at the same paper and thought, I'm not just smart enough. Same failure, 2 completely different pictures. We call this the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. And her research showed that the student who believed that they could improve, they did improve. And the student who believed their ability was fixed and they could not improve, they couldn't improve. Resilience, she said, was the key. And then there was a Swedish psychologist who wanted to understand why certain people become world-class at what they do. Not just talented, not just hardworking, elite.
Life is this. I like this.
Top of the top. And he found out that best performers in any field, musicians, athletes, surgeons, chess players, you name it, didn't just practice more than everyone else. They practiced differently. They would identify one specific weakness, work only on that, assess their progress honestly, and then move to the next weakness. Deliberate practice, he called it. Self-reflection, self-assessment, strategic improvement. So now we had 3 pillars: self-control, self-resilience, and self-assessment. 3 scientifically validated explanations for why some people succeed and others don't. And educators everywhere did what seemed obvious. They built these traits into school, into curriculums, into how teachers speak to children, and they waited for the results. But nothing changed. The struggling students stayed struggling. The achievement gaps stayed exactly where they were. For years, researchers tried to figure out. And then someone finally asked the question that should have been asked from the very beginning. What if we have the causation backwards? And here's the most important idea in this entire video. Correlation is not causation. 2 things can happen together without one causing the other. Successful people do wake up early, but waking up early does not make you successful. Successful people are disciplined, but teaching discipline does not produce success. What if, and follow this carefully, what if self-control, resilience, and self-reflection are not the inputs to success? What if they are the outputs? What if the environment the child is born into is what produces more traits and not the other way around? Because if that's true, then everything changes. Researchers began looking at one variable they had largely ignored, not the children, the parents. And what they found across thousands of families, across dozens of countries, over decades of observation, was three differences so consistent, so measurable, so devastating to their implication that it reframes almost everything you think you understand about why people end up where they do. The first difference is language. Wealthy people talk to their children constantly. They explain things, they ask questions, they use complex words, long sentences, and then they treat a simple dinner like an ongoing education. Poor parents communicate in commands like don't, no, stop. And by the time a child from a wealthy home turns 4 years old, they have heard 30 million words. Then a child from a poor home, 30 million words before they ever set a foot in a classroom. That's the gap. And that gap does not close. It grows every single year for the rest of their lives. The second difference is how parents respond to mistakes. A child from a wealthy home touches a hot stove. The parent kneels down, gets to the eye level, and explains what fire is and how the nerve endings in the skin send a pain signal to the brain and what the signal means. How to recognize the heat before it becomes dangerous. The child walks away with a model of how the world works. A child from a poor home touches the same stove and he gets scolded and the parents gets angry. Don't you ever do that again. The child walks away knowingly one thing, that they did something wrong, but don't know why. The only thing they know is if I do this, I get this response. Now take both children and place them in the same classroom. The first child sees the teacher as a friendly authority, someone to engage with, to question, to learn from. They smile. The teacher smiles back. The second child sees the teacher as the same way, all authority the same way, to be careful around. Make sure you don't do any mistake, because you will be schooled or punished. They go quiet, they look away. The teacher reads this as disengagement, maybe as a problem. Same classroom, same teacher, same opportunity, two completely different experiences. And then there's the third difference, the one that finally unlocks the marshmallow test. Wealthy parents keep their promises, not because they are more trustworthy people, not because they love their children more, but because they have money and they have the means to. They say we'll go to the beach next weekend, then they go. They say I will pick you up at 3, they're there. They say if you save up half, I will match it. They match it. Poor parents make the exact same promises with the exact same love, but a missed paycheck changes everything. Unexpected bill, a shift that runs long, a car that breaks down, a hospital bill they can't pay. The promise breaks, not out of carelessness, out of survival. Now go back to that 4-year-old sitting alone in the room, one marshmallow on the table, a researcher who just walked out of the door. If your entire life has taught you that adults do come back, that promises are kept, and the waiting is rewarded, you will wait. But if your entire life has taught you the opposite, you will eat the marshmallow, because experience has taught you something that no 4-year-old should have learned. Take what is in front of you right now, because later is not something you can count on, and is not promised, because in your mind, whatever you were promised, it was broken. The child is not failing a test of self-control. The child is demonstrating something that took years to learn. Based on their experiences, they do what they're supposed to do. The world is not reliable. The adults do not always come back. For 60 years, the most celebrated psychologist study in the world called the child rational response to their real life a character flaw. So now we arrive at the question that the researchers and educators in the self-help industry have never wanted to answer directly. If it's the environment, if it's the home, the language, the stability, the trust, then why don't we just fix that? Why don't we restructure schools to compensate, reach families earlier, change how parents behave? But they have tried. It didn't work.
The schools that model warmth and stability help, but not enough. Children arrived already shaped by the first 3 years of their life. The worldview already forming. The trust or mistrust of authority already wired. So researchers said, fine, go earlier, reach the parents directly, change how they raise their children. And here is where it gets uncomfortable. You cannot change how parents behave, not because they're stubborn, not because they don't care, but because every parent is playing a game. And the game is not how do I give my child the best possible future. The game is how do I survive in the community I actually live in right now. If you are a poor parent, your child will grow up in a world where authority is not negotiable, where the police do not listen to your arguments, where your boss does not want your opinion, where the people around you distrust anyone who acts like they're above the group. The most loving thing you can do is prepare your child for that world. Teach them to comply, to keep their head down, to not make themselves a target. If you are a wealthy parent, your child will grow up in a world where authority is absolutely negotiable. negotiable, where lawyers push back on judges, where executives debate each other in boardrooms, where confidence is rewarded and ambition is celebrated. The most loving thing you can do is teach your child to argue, to negotiate, to believe their voice has weight in any room they enter. Both parents are right. Both parents are doing exactly what their world requires, and that is the most unsettling part of this, because it means the problem is not values, it's not effort, it's not mindset. The problem is structure, and the structure is not an accident. Society has always been an hierarchy, and throughout all of human history, the people at the top have done one thing with remarkable consistency. They arrange the game so that their children stay at the top. Better school built wealthy zip codes, unpaid internships that require a parent who can financially support you, university legacy admissions, professional networks that are only accessible from the inside. None of this is hidden. None of this requires a conspiracy. It's simply what power does when left to its own logic. It protects itself, and for long stretches of history, this works. The hierarchy holds, people know their place, and the system reproduces itself generation after generation until it doesn't. And here is the pattern that has ended every empire, toppled every dynasty, and reset every social order in recorded history. Watch carefully, because it's not the pattern most people expect. As wealth concentrates at the top, the poor fall into debt just to survive. The debt compounds. They lose their land. Their children inherit the debt. Their children's children are born already behind. Now you have a majority of people with nothing left to lose. And then it's not the poor who start the revolution. It's the people just below the top. The educated ones, the ambitious ones, the ones who followed every rule, got every qualification, did everything right, and arrived at the door to find it already locked. These are the people who make a promise to the desperate majority: follow me and I will cancel your debts, give you land, and end your slavery. The French Revolution, not starving peasants, frustrated, blocked, educated bourgeoisie. The Chinese Revolution, not farmers, ambitious intellectuals with no path forward. Julius Caesar didn't rise because Rome was poor. He rose because Roman society had produced more ambitious, more powerful men than it had positions for them. He promised debt cancellation, land redistribution, freedom, and that is why they loved him. That is why they had to kill him. Every revolution, every single one, is not rich versus poor. It is the people with everything versus the people with almost enough, who are tired of waiting for the rest. And then the game resets. New faces at the top. Social mobility opens briefly. Talented people rise, and then those people have children, and they begin arranging the game. This is the full arc of human civilization, not progress, a cycle.
Bullshit. Day.
So now, what do you do with all of this? You could feel angry, that would be reasonable. You could feel hopeless, that would be reasonable too. But here's what I want you to take. The heaviest thing a person can carry is blame they were never supposed to own. Every time you looked at your own life and thought, why am I not further along? Why can't I just get it together? What is wrong with me? You were asking the wrong questions. Not because the effort doesn't matter, not because choices don't have consequences, not because you were measuring yourself against a standard that was built by people who started on a completely different floor of the same building and called it a fair race. The Marshmallow Test child who ate the marshmallow wasn't weak. They were paying attention. The parent who commanded instead of explained wasn't failing their child. They were preparing them for the only word they knew. The person who worked hard their whole life and still ended up exactly where they started didn't lack discipline. They were playing a game. Those rules are written before they were born. Understand that. Really understanding it doesn't make you a victim. It makes you honest, and honesty is the only place anything real ever starts. Because once you stop pouring energy into explaining away, something shifts. You start asking different questions. Not what is wrong with me, but what is the actual shape of this game? Where are the real leverage points? Who do I need to know? What risks are actually worth taking? What would I do if I stopped trying to earn a place in a system that was never designed to give me one, and started building something outside of it entirely? The people who have always understood how power works, they didn't beat the system by working harder inside. They understood it well enough to stop being surprised by it, to stop taking it personally, and to move through the world with their eyes finally open. That's not a small thing. Most people spend their entire lives never getting there. You just did. The game was never fair. But now you know what the game you're actually playing. And that changes everything. Peace.